3 months ago, the Portland Trail Blazers were one of the best stories in the NBA. A young team nobody picked to make the playoffs, clawed its way in, stole a game from the eventual Western Conference champion San Antonio Spurs, and had everybody in Portland feeling good about where this thing was headed. Making the playoffs is nice, but you don't build a franchise around moral victories, and Portland knew it. So this offseason they went for it. They traded for a 2-time All-Star point guard, hired a brand new head coach, have a franchise legend returning, and put together a starting five that might be one of the most talented and flat-out unpredictable groups in the entire West. On paper, it all looks great. Depending on who you ask though, this is either a house of cards that collapses by January or a sneaky best rebuild in the league that nobody's paying attention to. So today we're getting into all of it. Everything that changed, whether these pieces actually fit, and if this new-look Blazers team is ready to be a real problem in the West. Let's start with the move that flipped the whole conversation, because the first question everybody had was pretty simple. Does trading for Ja Morant even make sense? Honestly, at first glance, not really. When Blazers GM Joe Cronin got up at his end-of-season press conference, he said the quiet part out loud. Portland needed shooting. All season long, and especially in that Spurs series, they didn't have enough spacing. San Antonio packed the paint, basically dared Portland to beat them from outside, and the Blazers just couldn't do it consistently. Now, Damian Lillard coming back from injury helps with some of that, but Dame's in the last chapter of his career, and Portland's front office wasn't only thinking about next season, they were thinking about what comes after Dame too, which is what makes the Morant trade a little confusing on the surface. He doesn't fix Portland's shooting problem. If anything, he adds another guy to a roster that already struggled to score efficiently. But then you look at the price and it starts to click. A few years ago, the idea of Memphis trading Ja Morant was borderline unthinkable. This was their franchise. Fast forward 3 seasons and everything's different. After a rough stretch that dragged his name through the mud, Morant's value cratered. And by the time the real trade talks got going, the hard part was finding anybody willing to take a swing at all. And that's where Portland came in. They didn't have to gut their young core or hand over a pile of first-round picks. They got Morant for Jeremy Grant and Chris Murray. But before we get carried away with what they got, let's be fair about what they gave up. The main piece going to Memphis was Jeremy Grant. Coming off a decent year of 18.6 points a game on 45% from the field and just under 39% from three, which made him Portland's most dependable shooter on the perimeter. Here's the rest of it though. Grant's 31 now, his defense isn't what it used to be, and even at 6'8", he's never been much of a rebounder. His production's been sliding for a couple of years, while his contract hasn't budged, and at this point the salary outweighs what he actually gives you. The other piece was Chris Murray. Murray flashes the stuff every team wants from a role guy. He's athletic, he plays hard, he does the little things that don't show up in the box score. Problem is, the offense never came, and the defense by itself wasn't enough to lock down a spot in Portland's long-term plans. Now, after those two names, you'd expect the rest of the package to be loaded with first-round picks, but there weren't any. And that's why this trade got everybody talking. Because if Morant gets anywhere close to what he used to be, it could go down as one of the best bargains of the whole offseason. Morant's still only 26. Over 7 seasons, he's averaged 22.4 points, 7.4 assists, and 4.6 rebounds a night. 2-time All-Star, former most improved player. The talent was never in doubt, but it was everything around it. Starting in 2023, things unraveled. Multiple suspensions for flashing firearms on social media. Another one in 2025 after he mimicked a gun celebration during a game. Later that year, Memphis suspended him again for conduct detrimental to the team after he butted heads with the coaching staff. Then the injuries piled up. Last year, a sprained UCL held him to 20 games before shutting him down in January. And then there's the shooting. Can you really build around a point guard who's never turned into a consistent threat from three? Morant's career high from deep was 34% back in 21-22. Since then, he's mostly hung around 30%, and last season's 23.5% didn't do much to calm anybody down. In today's league, that's a tough profile to build around, especially for a 6'2" lead guard. But here's the thing, guys like Ja Morant don't hit the trade market very often. When he's right, he's still maybe the most explosive guard in the sport, the kind of guy who collapses a defense every time he touches the paint. So the whole trade really comes down to one question. Is the Ja Morant from the 21 to 23 era still in there somewhere? If he is, Portland just pulled off a heist. If he's not, this whole thing could fall apart as fast as it came together. And if he just stays on the floor, there's no real reason he can't get back to being that 20-point, 7-assist guard who changes the entire tempo of an offense. But the beauty of it is, Portland didn't tie itself down. Morant's under contract for 2 more years. If he's an all-star again, they extend him. If he's not, they let the deal run out or move him before it does. Low risk, huge upside. Pulling off the trade was the easy part though. To make this roster actually work, Portland's going to have to make some tough calls. And one of them might chip away at the thing that made last year's team so fun in the first place. To understand the biggest challenge this team is facing, we have to talk about a guy who had nothing to do with the trade, Damian Lillard. Morant was the flashy addition, but Dame coming home might matter just as much. After missing last season hurt, the greatest offensive player in franchise history is expected back on the floor, and before the injury, he was still cooking, right around 25 a game during his 24-25 run in Milwaukee. So Lillard's not walking back into Portland to be a role player. He wants the ball, and that's where it gets messy. Last season, one of Portland's biggest headaches was not having enough healthy guards. Injuries to Scoot Henderson, Drew Holiday, and Shaedon Sharpe left them thin for months. One off-season later, they flipped the problem completely. Now they might have too many. Ja Morant, Damian Lillard, Drew Holiday, Scoot Henderson, Shaedon Sharpe. That's one of the deepest guard rooms in the NBA. It's also a room where there aren't nearly enough minutes or starting spots to keep everybody happy. If Portland wants to squeeze out every drop of talent, the move is obvious. Start Morant and Lillard together. That's 2 guys who can generate offense whenever they feel like it and completely dictate the pace of the game. The catch is what you give up to do it. That backcourt doesn't fix the spacing issue, it might make it worse, and on defense, it drags Portland away from the identity that carried them into the playoffs in the first place. Alright, quick timeout, and only if you've got the means and you can keep it responsible. This one's brought to you by Prize Picks, America's #1 sports pick app. We've reached the World Cup final and we have Argentina versus Spain. Messi chasing his 2nd straight World Cup win and locking up his GOAT status, and on the other side, Lamine Yamal, the baby in the bathtub all those years ago. My picks for the final are Messi over on goals plus assists and Lamine Yamal over on goals plus assists. Prize Picks also have a Messi guarantee pick just for the final, over on 0.5 passes attempted by Messi. And it's genuinely dead simple. You just pick more or less on a couple of stats and lock it in. Prize Picks is available in most states, including California, Texas, and Florida. Use code HMA, play $5, and get $50 in lineups to start. Links in the description. Please remember to play responsibly. Now back to it. Still, if Morant gets back to all-star form, that's probably a trade-off Portland lives with. The rest of the lineup fills it pretty cleanly around them. Toumani Camara takes a 3 as one of the best defensive role players in the league and a guy who's quietly become a cornerstone for this franchise. Deni Avdija, fresh off a breakout all-star year, gives you another playmaker up front after putting up 24.2 points, 6.9 rebounds, and 6.7 assists, and Donovan Clingan holds down the middle. That's a seriously talented starting 5. Then look at the bench. Drew Holiday, Scoot Henderson, Shaedon Sharpe, Robert Williams. The talent is not the issue here, it's whether it all fits together. Let's start with Dame. Lillard just turned 36 and he's coming off a torn Achilles. Even for a player this good, there's no promise he comes back as the same guy. The encouraging part is the shooting should hold up. We saw a reminder of that last All-Star weekend when he won yet another 3-point contest. His range was never the question, it's everything else. Can he still create separation off the dribble? Can Portland actually ask him to carry the same load he did during his first run here? And even if all of that is a yes, there's a bigger problem waiting, because now he's next to Ja Morant, another 6'2" guard who makes his money almost entirely on the offensive end. On their own, both guys are talented enough to build an offense around. Together, they recreate the exact problem Portland spent years trying to get away from. Defense. You can hide one small offense-first guard. Hiding 2 of them night after night is where it gets ugly. Every possession, Camara, Avdija, Clingan, and the rest of that front court will be cleaning up messes at the point of attack. That's a brutal ask over 82 games, let alone a playoff series. And we've seen this movie before with Dame and CJ McCollum. It felt like Joe Cronin had finally learned that lesson. Over the last few years, Portland quietly built around length, athleticism, and defensive versatility. You saw it against San Antonio. They lost 4-1, but that series was way more competitive than the score says, because they could actually guard. Now, by dropping Morant in next to Lillard, Portland's risking a lot of that progress. Yeah, they've still got real defensive weapons in Kamara, Klingon, and Holiday, but a defense is only as good as its weakest link. And two small guards sharing heavy minutes is a big weak link. As long as those two guards are logging major minutes together, Portland's defensive ceiling probably isn't elite anymore, and we all know how that usually ends in the playoffs. So this lineup should be one of the most explosive offensive groups in the West, but it all comes with a real bill attached. Whatever Portland gains on one end, they're at risk of handing it right back on the other. The Blazers have already run this experiment once. Lillard and CJ McCollum gave them years of great guard play, a bunch of regular season wins, and one trip to the Western Conference Finals. But every postseason, it came apart the same way. The offense got them in the door, but the defense couldn't get them any further. Now Portland's betting that swapping McCollum for Morant changes the ending. History says that won't be simple, which is a big reason Deni Avdija is the most important piece on this roster. Last year he carried a way heavier offensive load than anyone expected, and that pulled from what he could give on defense. With Morant and Lillard handling most of the playmaking now, Portland can let Avdija get back to what makes him special, using his size and physicality to hit on both ends. On paper, this group can catch anybody. Whether the pieces truly click is a different question, and it's the one thing that's going to define Portland's season. But all of it, the talent, the fit, the upside, the worries, comes back to one guy. You can draw up the perfect roster on paper, but if the locker room's disconnected and nobody buys into the same identity, none of it means anything. Which is why the most important move Portland made this summer might have been their new head coach. And after the year this franchise just had, that hire matters. Portland's coaching situation has been anything but steady. Chauncey Billups' run ended abruptly after the gambling scandal that hung over the whole organization, which forced the Blazers into a coaching search and maybe the worst possible moment in their rebuild. Early on, Thiago Splitter looked like the frontrunner, but once Splitter took the job in Chicago instead, the search came down to two names: Minnesota assistant Micah Norrie and Boston assistant Tyler Lashbrook. In the end, Cronin and the front office went with Norrie. This is his first crack at being an NBA head coach, but don't confuse that with being green. By the time the 26-27 season tips off, Norrie will have spent almost 2 decades on NBA benches. He got started in Toronto back in 2009, then bounced through Sacramento, Denver, and Detroit. And over the last 5 years, he became Chris Finch's lead assistant in Minnesota. Around the league, Norrie's built one of the best reputations of any assistant out there. Sharp tactician, obsessive about details, and maybe the most important thing for this job, he knows how to connect with people. Guys around the league half-jokingly call him the Ted Lasso of the NBA, for the energy he brings into a locker room. And that's exactly what this Blazers team needs. Coaching this roster won't just be about drawing up an offense, but also managing egos and getting veterans and young guys to buy into the same thing at the same time. And the relationship stuff isn't his only strength. He's shown he can coach when the lights are brightest. During the 2024 playoffs, after Chris Finch hurt his knee, Norrie stepped into the sideline and helped guide Minnesota past the defending champion Denver Nuggets and into the Western Conference Finals. And that wasn't a one-off. Last January, Finch was out again before a matchup with the eventual West champ Spurs, and Norrie took over. Minnesota fell down 16-0 and trailed by as many as 19. The Wolves came all the way back and won 104-103. One game doesn't make somebody an elite coach, but moments like that are exactly why Norrie's been one of the most respected assistants in the league, and his philosophy might fit Portland even better than his resume. Over 5 years in Minnesota, Norrie helped Finch run a free-flowing offense built on quick decisions, constant ball movement, and guys reading the defense on the fly. For a team stacked with creators, that makes a ton of sense. A system that spreads the playmaking around might be exactly what they need to help keep everybody involved. Now, Norrie's deal is only one guaranteed year with 2 team options after that. That might sound like the front office is hedging its bets. Really, it's about urgency. Portland thinks this roster can compete now, and Norrie's already laying out how he wants to get there. The Blazers led the league in turnovers last year, sat near the bottom in field goal percentage, and couldn't close, going just 21 and 22 in games decided by 2 possessions. Norrie's already flagged all of it: cleaner late game execution, better shot selection, more space for Dame, and a dangerous 2-man game between Lillard and Avdija. He even flew to South Carolina to sit down with Morant face to face and came away convinced Ja is locked in and fully bought into this next chapter. But now comes the hard part. Norrie is inheriting one of the trickiest balancing acts in the league. A team good enough to win now, young enough to keep building for later. That's why, more than anybody Portland brought in this summer, Norrie might be the move that decides whether this season is remembered as the start of something real or just another talented team that never quite figured it out. So where does this all leave Portland? Truth is, they've still got a long way to go. The West isn't getting any softer. San Antonio and OKC are both coming off deep playoff runs, and right now, they're the teams to beat. Behind them, you've got battle-tested contenders like Denver, Minnesota, and the Lakers, led by 3 of the best players alive: Luka Doncic, Nikola Jokic, and Anthony Edwards. Cracking that tier doesn't happen overnight. But that doesn't mean this offseason was a miss. The goal was never to turn Portland into an instant title favourite. It was to raise the ceiling, to take a young playoff team and find another gear. This roster's far from perfect. It's got obvious flaws, some hard questions, and a lot of uncertainty. It's also loaded enough to make the Blazers one of the most fascinating teams in the league next year. So when I say this is not the same Portland Trail Blazers, I mean it top to bottom. New star, returning legend, new coach, and a completely different ceiling. They've got enough talent to make anybody's life miserable in a 7-game series, and enough question marks to make just about any outcome believable. So drop your take in the comments. How far do you think the Blazers go next season? And as always, if you enjoyed the video, hit the like and hype buttons, subscribe for more, and I'll see you in the next one.